Hi, I'm Firas, and welcome back to BrandBucket Academy. In this episode, we're diving into the importance of defining and living your company's core values. Margot Bushnaq, founder and CEO of BrandBucket, joins us to unpack how values shape brand identity, build team culture, and drive consistency in business decisions. We'll explore how to identify authentic values, keep them actionable, and evolve them as your company grows, while avoiding the trap of sounding generic or performative. Let's get into it. Welcome back. Next, we're going to be talking about defining core values.
Okay.
The role of core values. What are core values, first of all, and why do they matter for a business?
The core values can encompass a lot of things. It can talk about the why of your business, like the reason that you exist and what makes you different from your competitors. It can be the culture of the company. It can be kind of your grand beliefs about how business should work and how the world should work. It can be all of those things, just what you pick and choose to portray to your customers and what you decide to put into your product.
Yep.
is your choice ultimately, and what defines your brand.
Speaking of that, how do core values influence brand behavior, culture, perception?
It's everything's a choice. So you can have your core values, and if they align with your customer base, then you can put your core values out there for everyone to see. Or you can be kind of a more private organization that puts your business values out there and maybe not your personal or ethical values. And you can allow a window into your company culture. You can do that in various ways, blog posts, you can have a social media for your company, you can show the people, or you can be a more of a private organization and you just, talk a little less about your culture, but your customers still kind of want to know who's behind it and the faces and the people behind it. So you have to give a little bit of information.
Yeah, speaking of giving a little bit, so what happens when a brand doesn't have clearly defined values?
If you're all over the place, it's going to show. Your messaging is going to be wonky. You're going to not really have a cohesive message. Customers aren't going to know what you stand for, and while they might like what you offer as far as product or service, they're not going to form that attachment that will make them stick with you even if someone else comes along. So you need to clearly communicate a very defined set of values.
Great. Next, we're going to be talking about how to identify your values. So the first question is, what's the best way for a founder or team to discover their authentic core values?
It all has to, you can't just build a company on ethics. You're building a company based on a product or a service that you're providing. So the core reason for that product or service is the starting point for your values. You have to clearly articulate, what you're going to be providing, how you're going to provide it, and why you've chosen to build it in such a manner, or why you choose to make certain decisions. And if you can clearly articulate that on your website and clearly articulate it to your team, you articulate it at the hiring process, everyone needs to be on the same page.
Yeah. So should core values come from the top down or bottom up, or a balance between the two? What's
top down, meaning from management down. If you're an established company with a hierarchy of employees and you are just now kind of trying to refocus your values, I think it should be somewhere in between, because at that point, your employees are your culture, and you can't just decide what your values are going to be and enforce it on everybody. Hopefully, you've kind of outlined your values before that point, So really, it is going to be a top down because it's going to be the founders and the first kind of nucleus of people that you're hiring that define it. And it's really, really good idea. It's a really, really good idea to have that defined so that you can hire for cultural fit.
Yeah. If you are a startup, basically defining your core values and from the beginning, and as you're hiring and as you're building up the team, it is going to end up being a top down.
Mm.
But then with time, you might also want to keep the door open to listen in to feedback from customers and your employees ultimately, to see if there is any kind of fine tuning that your core values should have along the way. Not that there would be much, but ultimately it's just how the message is resonating most of the time could potentially be miscommunicated and you need to just adjust to that. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, definitely. Values can be adjusted over time. And I think paying attention to your team is important. And especially if you've been around a long, long time, the world shifts. Things become more important over time and other things become less important. And you need to be a living, breathing organism as a company.
Yeah.
But it definitely helps if you've defined from the beginning what your values are, as far as kind of what our business values are and what type of workplace environment you're building, because then it's much, much easier than everyone's on the same page from their first day at work.
Yeah.
They come in, they know exactly what to expect, they know what's expected of them, and hopefully they've been selected because they fit.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I guess leads to the next question is how do you balance aspirational values with ones that are actually lived day to day?
Day-to-day values is more the company culture, and aspirational values, I think, is sort of more tied to the brand that you're putting out there. And
Like the mission or the why?
The mission, the why, even if you've decided your personality of your brand is very fun, very youthful, as your company ages out of that, as your employees age out of that, you still need to, if you've decided that that's what your brand is, you need to be consistent with it. And you need to, you can't have people becoming curmudgeons just because they're getting older, that they were hired to be fun and portray a sense of youth.
That's great.
That's a really bad answer.
Why? No, I think it's a great answer.
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess our next topic, we're going to be talking about making values actionable. Once you've defined your values, how do you integrate them into everyday business operations?
It hopefully comes naturally if you've hired from the beginning and you have a great fit and your team is all on board. But it does help at critical moments to remind yourself and your team of the core values. There's going to be times where you're at a junction where you have to make a very hard decision as far as a product or cutbacks, or even, we're about to get funding and explode in growth, and this is what's going to happen. And those key moments is really when you need to zoom in and refocus and kind of reabsorb and take to heart the core values so that your steps in the next moments following that junction are in line.
Yep. Makes perfect sense. What are ways to reinforce core values across hiring, marketing, customer experience, basically all the different departments and operational roles within your organization?
Well, if you're a really big company, you've probably designated a couple of people who are really just in charge of making sure all that messaging is on point. But if you're a smaller company, it's really just a task for the founders and the management team to just remind themselves on a daily basis, this is part of our job. And they need to enforce it. And everything they say and every email they send and every marketing communication that they give a final pass to, that needs to go through their eyes, and they're the gatekeepers of it.
Yep. How can values be communicated clearly without sounding cliche or generic?
Cliche and generic usually isn't coming from authenticity. I think if you tell a story and tie your values into your story and explain why, your values are your values, you can't just say we stand for this. There has to be a because. That it's,
Yeah,
as long as it's
yeah,
authentic and comes from true experience,
yeah,
it
yeah,
it it um it won't be
yeah.
cliche.
I think that's a great answer. It's definitely, there's so many things that you can do, and so many tools that you can in your communication of your values, by maybe even bringing in customer experiences as examples of winning a deal because they resonated with our value X, or we were able to hire like a great chief of marketing because our values resonated with their mission and what they wanted to do. And all of those messages can definitely penetrate within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to remind employees and the management team of your core values without actually just going out and just repeating them,
And shoving it
but
down their
actually
throat.
showing them
Yeah.
as an example
Mhm.
how the core values of the business actually resonated into impacting the business, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. Next, we're going to be talking about consistency. What are some signs that a business action are misaligned with its stated values?
I think it's more of a subconscious feeling. You can just tell when a business is being inauthentic. That's a big word with Gen Z, is authenticity. And it's a sense, and some people have a very strong sense of when something authentic and when it's not. And I think when you dig into why something seems inauthentic, it's because there's no alignment.
Yeah. How can teams stay accountable to their values during periods of growth or change?
That, again, that's a piece of, I wouldn't say management 101, maybe management 103, of you can't just, manage off the cuff. You need to constantly be referencing back to a core set of beliefs of why someone was hired, why we do what we do. And communication, especially any written communication, just needs to kind of pass through that filter of does this check with what we stand for.
Yeah. Is it okay for core values to evolve over time? And if so, how should that be handled?
It's absolutely okay, especially if you've been a company for 100 years. You're definitely not going to have the same value and value set in 1920 as you do in 2020. It needs to be slow and make sense with the time. There are cases of brands who don't change very quickly with the times, and then they have to quickly reset, and it seems obvious and odd. But after a few years, customers get over it, but they do. So the best way to do it is to do it so subtly and so in tune with the times that people don't notice that it's changing.
Okay. Um, what's your advice for someone who's never thought about their business values before?
Mm. It definitely all comes from your brand personality and the why of your business. The kind of core reason for your business's existence. So if you haven't stopped to think about that, now is the time to do it, regardless of how big you are or how far along in your journey you are. Once you figure out your why, and then also look around you at your team and kind of, there's a reason that you're a team and that the people who are there. And you sit down and you look at your strengths and kind of what is the glue that brings you all together. And if you can put it in writing, and it's a process, it's going to take a full day of meetings, just go off site somewhere and sit down and talk about it. But when everyone's on the same page, it's such a good feeling. You put it down. Okay, this is why we are here, and this is why what we are doing makes a difference in this world.
Can you share an example of a brand that has built real loyalty around its values?
The most classic example is Apple. Its values, other than its mission about challenging the status quo, its kind of unstated value is they're doing that by less is more. And it angers some people. It angers computer geeks when they take away ports and when they take away the the CD drive of a computer. But what they're really getting down to is kind of the core of what a computer is that solves the most problems for the most people. And at the end of the day, there are more people that appreciate that than that are angered by it.
What's one mindset shift that helps founders define and commit to values that truly matter?
I don't know. You're a founder. What are your thoughts on that? Why did you write that question?
It's because I think there's always that, like there's that the yin and yang, like whenever you're thinking about your core values, being emotionally attached to what you really believe, but at the same time, we all have a certain sense of what's the reaction to that going to be, right? What if somebody thinks differently than I? How would they look? Am I going to offend them? Am I going to be turning them away? And how do I project my value or my why or my mission in a way that's not offensive, but at the same time trying to explain why I think that way? And basically over time, things change and you basically need to be somewhat adaptive, but at the same time, it's almost always of the why is the why, like why are you thinking of that as a core value?
So you're saying your mindset shift is not worrying so much about people's reaction and just being true to yourself? Or
definitely you want to be very true to yourself and you never want to compromise why you think, like I have very different maybe mindset and personality when it comes to building products, like in being as an entrepreneur. Once you've identified what you want to build, your why or what you want to be able to attach to it is almost always kind of like push forward, bulldoze through what you want to go build. But at the same time, you want to keep and allow yourself that flexibility to be able to pivot, be able to redefine, be it a target audience or reapply the technology in a different space. So the mindset shift is a lot more defined by the reaction of the marketplace to what you're building and being receptive to it. Not necessarily the core value as much as how it's being perceived and figuring out a way to actually continue being with the core value, but presenting it in a different way or going after a different segment that's more in alignment with your core value that you're trying to present. So, core values aren't just words on a wall. They're the foundation of how your brand operates, communicates, and grows. When values are clear and lived, they become a powerful compass for everything from hiring and product decision to brand perception and loyalty. If you're building a brand that means something, start with what matters most: Visit brandbucket.com to find a name that reflects your mission, your message, and your values. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.